If you were the CEO of a company, back in my day, you only really had three choices of cars, because Rolls-Royces and Bentleys were for the chairman. The CEO had the choice of either a Jaguar XJ, a Mercedes S-Class or a BMW 7 Series. But nowadays, there is a far greater choice. Of course, Audi muscled in on that territory with the A8, and Range Rover is now much more Mayfair than muddy field. And of course, we've had the likes of Lexus and even Genesis, Hyundai's luxury arms kind of start to muscle in on this market. And of course, we no longer have a Jaguar XJ. So really it comes down to the two main rivals, the old firm as it were, which was the S-Class and the 7 Series. And they suited two different styles of customers. You see, if you're an S-Class buyer, you're more likely to have been driven. If you were a 7 Series customer, you're more likely to be a driver. But even that got a little bit blurred, especially with the likes of the AMG fettled S-Classes. And then of course you had sort of diesels and hybrids and all sorts of things to start muddy the water. And that's before we start to talk about electric. Because to confuse us even further, Mercedes-Benz launched the EQS, its all-electric S-Class, if you like. And now BMW have thrown their hat into the ring with this, the all-new BMW i7. So how do we determine what is the best, the king, the superior of the all-electric limousines between these two old firm rivals? Well, there was only one thing to do, and that was to bring it on a road trip to Scotland. So, welcome back to Lochmaben, welcome to the new BMW i7, and as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we get on to this week's road test review of the new BMW i7, of course it's that time when I'm going to ask you to make sure that you are subscribed to the AutoEV channel. Then once you've done that, make sure you press that little bell button down below, because then that way you get notified of when our next video is uploaded and goes live. Once you've watched the video, if you do enjoy it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And don't forget, please do leave us your comments down below. Let us know what your thoughts are on the cars that we review, and of course on AutoEV channel as a whole. So as I say, this is BMW throwing their hat into the ring to compete with the Mercedes-Benz EQS. But unlike the EQS, which is a separate model to the S-Class, in other words, if you want an electric S-Class, you have to buy the EQS, and the S-Class purely remains piston-engined, the i7 is the all-electric version of the new 7 Series. So much like they've done with the iX1, iX3 and the i4, you're able to buy, or you will be able to buy this with petrol, diesel and hybrids. But in the UK from launch, it is they've gone with the fully electric version first. So is BMW's approach right? Because obviously to combine, to design a platform that's going to have to share piston engines and electric power, you're going to have to make some compromises, whereas Mercedes, they've gone down two separate routes where there potentially is no compromises to be made. So which one's best for your money? But before we get started, let's take a snapshot of what the BMW i7 is really all about. Well, as I say, this is the new 7 Series, and it launches in the UK at first as a fully electric i7, with the combustion engine variants coming along later. Which, as I said, it does mean that the platform it sits on has to be engineered for both types of powertrains, and so it isn't a dedicated EV architecture. It has a 101.7 kilowatt hour usable battery that should give, according to WLTP figures, a combined range of up to 385 miles. And prices start from around £110,000 and move skywards, depending on the trim and final specification that you choose. So, similar cars, same marketplace, two very different approaches. Who does it right, Mercedes-Benz or BMW? Well, of course, we rate the Mercedes-Benz EQS very, very highly. So the only way we're going to find out if the i7 is even better is by putting it through the road test that actual car buyers are trusting when it comes to choosing their next EV. And of course, well, that's the AutoEV one. So let's start with the elephant in the room, literally, the styling of the new i7. Controversial or what? Now, there are two models available. There's the Excellence trim level and the M Sport. This particular one is an Excellence model. And I have to be honest with you, it's probably the one that I would go for. And as hard as this is for me to say, this is kind of growing on me. It's not a looker, I will give you that, but like the iX, I've spent a lot of time with this car this week, and there's more to it than just the styling. Now, I had it parked next to a 7 Series the other day. A 7 Series actually belonged to my ex-wife, and we were both chatting about it, and there's no doubt about it, the previous generation 7 Series is quite a handsome car. This is going for a very different style here. It's going for a statement. And this is to do with the Chinese market. The young executives in China want to make a statement about their wealth. But sometimes making a statement can be a bad thing. Just ask Prince Andrew. There's no doubt about it. It's going to divide a lot of opinion. Let's go through it. You've got, of course, this controversial split headlight design where you've got your DRLs up at the top here, and then your main beam headlamps down here. Now, even if you want to go even more gauche than what's already here, you can actually option the DRLs with Swarovski crystals. And then, of course, we come to the grille, which isn't a grille anymore. It's just BMW's signature double kidney. Now, it comes with a thing called iconic glow, which means at night this is illuminated. I know, you trust me on this, you kind of get used to it. You do a little bit, I will say that. The problem is, the reason why I say the Excellence, in my opinion, is a bit better than the M Sport. The M Sport has a bit of black kind of going on down here, a bit like the iX has, more black trim, especially when you go for a lighter colour. It really stands out, and it looks like a bit of a mess at the front, or even more of a mess at the front than the car is already. Of course, you've got your cooling that's down here, your active cooling that opens up and closes, and you've got your kind of front camera there, and obviously some sensors in there as well for your, sort of like for your proximity controls and such things as that. A very low set number plate as well on the front of it, and it's a very kind of, sort of like bluff front end. Now, it's not as aerodynamically efficient as the EQS, but it is still quite an aerodynamic car. I think the EQS is 0.21 CD, I think this is 0.26, so it's still fairly decent for a car that has got this big kind of bluff front end. But yeah, as I say, it's not going to be for everyone. But thankfully, the front is really the worst view of it, if I'm being honest with you. Thankfully, when you move around the side of the car, things get a lot better. I think actually it's quite a handsome car inside profile. It is a sort of physically bigger looking car than the previous generation 7 Series, and interestingly as well, you no longer get a short wheelbase and a long wheelbase version. This is the standard length car that you will buy, which is actually longer in length and wheelbase than the previous generation's extended wheelbase version, a long wheelbase version of the old 7 Series. So there's one kind of size fits all now, and as we'll see when we go into the interior, it gives it a huge amount of practicality. 19-inch wheels are standard. These are 20s. You're going to want the 20s at least. You can go up another size, you can go up to 21s, but you're certainly going to need at least the 20s to kind of fill these big arches, because you can see it's a much more kind of slab-sided car than the previous generation one. Also worth noting as well is this Excellence trim gets the chrome round it. The M Sport will give it sort of like what they call the high gloss black finish, which just adds on, and whilst it does kind of tone the grille down, as I say, if you go for a lighter colour, you'll see those kind of extra bits of black around the front, which I really don't think suit it. And I quite like the chrome round the car. It's a luxury car. It kind of speaks of luxury. You get some nice chrome down the bottom here, and in this little section down in here is the puddle lamps. So when you open the car at night, these shine down onto the ground so you can see where you're stepping into, which is quite nice. Recessed door handles, they're nice and flush. You just reach in and open the door by that. And you also get the soft close as well, soft close doors too. As I say, nice big opening rear door to get in, because I see you've got this nice big long wheelbase with the car now. And another nice little kind of touch that you get is you get a little kind of heart shape in this rear glass, which has got kind of triangles on it. Apart from there, there's a little heart shape in it, which is, I don't know why, but it's quite nice. Charging flap at the back, and as I say, that's pretty much it. Nice strong kind of shoulder line here, but nothing too extraneous. As I say, as controversial as the front is, the side is quite kind of plain, quite stylish, and as I say, probably one of its best angles in fairness. And as you come round the back, well, we're kind of back to kind of standard fare BMW in fairness, where it's actually quite, I think it's quite nice actually. I quite like the rear angle of this car. Your number plate set down in the bumper, quite a nice sort of deep opening boot that goes down to bumper level. These really nice kind of slim sort of like LED tail lights that come round the back there. Your big BMW roundel there, again with the kind of blue round it. You need to stop doing that, BMW, I don't care. that it's electric. I don't need to advertise the fact. It's got blue around it, don't know why you need it. Your little i7 badge over on this side here, and of course your xDrive 60. xDrive because it's all-wheel drive, it's dual motor this car, but we'll talk about that when I'm driving it. Nice recessed boot button there, you just press that and the boot opens electronically, and then down at the bottom you get your reversing light, and of course parking sensors, and there is a plethora of cameras around the car when it comes to the safety. So, much more interesting looking, and I'll use the word interesting rather than anything else to be kind, than the EQS, which I feel is just a little bit bland. But it's still quite controversial, and BMW are courting this controversy as well with some of the styling. But I have to say, apart from that front end, I quite like the car. It's not quite as controversial as, say, the iX or this new hideous thing that the M department's brought out, the XM, which thankfully we don't get to review because it's got a combustion engine. I'm quite glad of that because I don't want that parked outside my house. But what do you think? Is this right? Is this the right move for BMW with the 7 Series? I mean, let's remember, when Chris Bangle started as the design chief of BMW, and we went from the kind of svelte, kind of really kind of great looking E38, and he brought out the controversial E60 with that odd kind of boot lid on it, we don't really look at it in the kind of same way we maybe did when it first came out. Is that going to be the same for the i7? Are we going to look at it back in a few years and go, actually it's quite a handsome car? As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Now, like I said, unlike the EQS, which has got that swooping lift back at the rear, this is a traditional 3-box saloon, and your boot opens electronically to reveal 500 litres of boot space. Now that's 110 shy of the Mercedes-Benz, but interestingly enough, it's exactly the same volume as the BMW iX, the big SUV, so it's not short on space, in fairness. The boot goes back quite a long way. As you can see, I've got my really long golf umbrella here, so that actually does fit in lengthways along that boot space. Don't have my suitcases because I don't need them. I'm going to visit my mother. My little bag there, but that's a nice usable space. You also get, I'll move my camera bag as well, some good underfloor storage for your cables as well, so you don't need to hold them in a separate bag in the boot space. So that is your usable luggage space, and it's quite a nice shape. There's not too much wheel arch intrusion as you go in, and the hinges obviously go into the sides here, so again you've got that available height. There's no storage up at the front, however, because as I say, remember, this is a shared platform. It's going to come with internal combustion engine cars as well. But then remember as well, even though the EQS is a dedicated EV platform, there's no storage at the front of that car either. So that's your boot space. Now, normally when I talk about the rear seat space of a car on one of these reviews, I say, yeah, there's enough legroom, there's enough headroom, isofix point, storage, job done. Not with the i7, and I'm sure if you're a regular kind of car viewer of YouTube, you'll have seen some of the party tricks of that. But let's start with the basics. As I say, there's no long wheelbase version of the i7. This is it, and it is just gargantuan back here. There's so much space. That seat is actually pushed further back. That's not my driving position. My driving position is further forward than that, because the seat slides back to let you get in and out easily enough. So there's just bags of space here. Now, interestingly enough, this particular car isn't optioned up with everything you can get. It's quite a basic car, this one that I've got. Thanks, BMW. But even so, it feels so luxurious. This is Verganza, this particular material, which I think is a man-made leather. But you can have it with Napa, you can have it with cashmere, which I have to admit is probably quite really nice, I'd say. The other thing this car doesn't have is the executive lounge package, which allows you to recline the rear seats and, you know, have these aircraft style seats where you can push the passenger seat forward as well. So you can have that as an option, expensive option, but you can have it. But it does have one option, which is an option that I would urge you to take, if nothing else, just for the pure joy of seeing your child's face when this thing comes out of the ceiling. It has remote controls in the door here. So I've got little touch screens in here like a mobile phone, and I can activate this, which is the theatre package. That is a 32 or just under a 32-inch 8K TV screen. that comes down from the ceiling. There's a blind that goes across here as well, so you can really zoom out, but I just want to get some light in, which has inbuilt Amazon Fire. So I've logged into my Amazon account here. I had my daughter and a friend in the back of the car the other day. Couldn't get them out. They were sitting watching penguins in Madagascar or something. They sat and watched about 3 episodes in the back of the car. They thought it was wonderful. It's all touch screen as well. So the downside with it, in some respects, is there's nothing that plays in this particular format because the screen is quite shallow. There's nothing to play in that particular format. But as I say, you just log into your Amazon account and it all comes up. You can sit and play. We can sit and watch a movie if we wanted. I mean, it's phenomenal what you can have on here. I mean, it's fantastic. And you can control it all from here, or you can use the touch pads in the door. Now, as I say, you don't get anything in the format, so the screen is kind of pinched in, or the actual visible picture is pinched in. Hang on, why is it not? I think it's because I'm in a really bad area. Here we go there. So it kind of it closes it down, so you've just got this kind of space here. But even so, that's phenomenal. That's absolutely wonderful. Now, when you're not using it, it just folds up out the way. As I say, there is a blind in the car that can cover along here, and as you can see, part of the theatre package is it puts these side blinds and rear blinds up as well. And the sound quality from this is incredible as well. It comes through all the sound speakers in the car. So if you have kids and you're going on long trips, this is it. It also has an HDMI socket as well, so you can plug a games console into it as well. So anything that works off an HDMI cable, you can plug that in. And then when you're not using it, you can just fold it all away. I love that. I absolutely love that. It's really neatly integrated. And in terms of cost, that is half the price of the Mercedes-Benz EQS's Hyperscreen. Give me that any day over the I like the Hyperscreen, but give me that any day if it keeps my daughter quiet on a long trip. Phenomenal. The panoramic roof as well, the Sky Lounge package, I think it's called. You get these little kind of strips in the roof as well, which kind of light up at night as well. So it gives a beautiful ambience in here. And I'll show you the rest of the sort of the front of the cabin in a second with the interior lights. I'll put some B-roll up of what the car's like at night, so you can see it, because the whole thing just, it's got such a lovely feeling in this car when that's all lit up, and you can change the colours and they glow different colours. Phenomenal. But back to normal stuff now. You've got a tiny little sort of bit of storage in there as well for like a mobile phone or something like that, and you've got a flip down armrest as well, which does have, if I can remember how to do it, because it took me ages to figure out how to do it. Is this it? There's storage in there. There's also cup holders that slide out here as well. I can't remember how you do it. You're just going to have to trust me on this. Oh, there we go. There we are. 2 cup holders in there, so they slide out as well. But obviously you can option this up with lots of different packages. I say this is quite a kind of basic car, so you can option this up to do different types of things. But the comfort is out off the scale in the back of this car. As I say, even with this kind of organza upholstery, and as I say, without the kind of executive airline kind of seats, it's just fantastic back here. It's so comfortable. And as I say, when you've got the blind open, even with the TV folded up, the cabin's flooded with light, so there's a huge amount of a feeling of space back here, as you'd expect for a car of this length. But in terms of in-car gimmicks, that is phenomenal and worth every single penny of the £4,000 it costs. That's brilliant. I'd rather sit and watch that than be in my house at times. That's fabulous. Of course, the downside with not having a bespoke EV platform is you do have that transmission tunnel to bear with. But of course, the type of car that this is, whilst you can get 3 people across the rear bench quite easily, you're probably only really ever going to have 2 in the back here, so it might not be such a problem. But even so, it is the one downside with i7, where the EQS has a completely flat floor. But don't think you're shortchanged by being up front either, because whilst I say Mercedes-Benz do that big hyperscreen, what you've got with the BMW is this. Now, and it's similar to what we've seen before in the iX and the i4, and of course all the new i products, in fairness, which is this lovely kind of curved instrumentation binnacle, where you've got your driver information display dashboard right in front of you and all your infotainment grouped here. which is touchscreen, but you can also use it with the sort of like the iDrive controller, as I still call it, here. Now, this is BMW's 8th generation user interface, and it's really nice to use, really, really easy. The only thing I will say is there's quite a lot to learn, as you probably will get with most of these type of cars, and especially with a luxury car like the i7 and obviously like the EQS. There's a lot you can tailor to yourself, so there's a lot to learn about in here. So you go into your sort of like your apps menu and you see there's absolutely loads of them. You know, so to find something, you know, to adjust the seat, for instance, you know, if you want sort of like lumbar support, it's in here. It's not a button on the side of the seat. You've got to go into the screen and go into seat comfort and choose which bit of the seat you want to move. The basic movement of the seat is obviously done from these controls on the door, but that's sort of, you know, sort of your basics, as I say. It's not controlling the actual sort of like lumbar support or headrest adjustment. Oh, sorry, headrest adjustment is, apologies. So headrest adjustment is, you can alter it up and down. But yeah, there's more to go into in there. And this is the other thing that I've got a little bit of a beef about. Now, I took this car, I've done quite a long journeys in this car this week. Hang on, let me try and turn this fan off, because it cannot be activated in automatic program. I don't want the automatic program anyway. There we go, that's all shut off now. I've done quite a couple of long journeys in this car, all motorway stuff. So I was up to the new Citroen EC4 launch in Worcestershire the other day, which you'll see on the channel by the time this one comes out. And it was majority motorway, and I obviously coming up and down to Scotland, and I cannot, for the life of me, couldn't find the distance guided cruise control. You know, you're on the motorway, you want distance guided cruise control. It doesn't have it. It genuinely doesn't have it. It doesn't have it on this car. I have searched for it everywhere. I've even asked the car because it has voice recognition. It doesn't have it. Why does it not have distance guided cruise control? Which is even more odd when you realise the way the adaptive regeneration on the brakes work. Really, really odd that. I can't fathom it. I think it's buried in an option pack that this car doesn't have. And that's really stingy. And the other thing that really bugs me is no ventilated seats. You've got to option them in a seat pack. You know, now I had a 2005 Saab 95 Aero that had ventilated seats, and it didn't cost 110 grand. In fact, it cost me less than that, the option of that rear TV did. So yeah, there's a couple of things that I must admit BMW maybe need to have kind of thought about when it comes to options. Talking of which, as I say, this is quite a basic car. This has got the 20-inch wheels. It's got the theatre package. It also has a thing called the Crystal Clarity controls, I think they call it, which is the iDrive control of the toggle switch, the seat controls and things, all this kind of crystal finish, which I didn't particularly like when I first saw an iX. I kind of like it in here. It kind of just adds a little bit to the theatre and the drama of the interior of the i7, so I do quite like it. You've got this, the kind of crystal fascia across here. Now this glows depending at night as well, depending on the mode that you're in. I can't show you it at the moment because it's obviously very light today, but I will put up some B-roll of what it looks like in the dark, because it is quite impressive and you can dull it down in terms of how bright it is. But basically, if you go into my modes, which you can press here, and then obviously there's different sort of things. So digital art comes up. You'll see there, the blind opens up at the top, and this glows purple, and you've got all this kind of what they'll call Quantum Garden, a digital piece of art from artist Cao Fei. I don't know who that is, but there you go. And it does this, and it makes that all glow purple. What else do we have? Yeah, if you go into this, the sport mode, everything goes red, and you can feel the tightening up of the bolsters here, and the dashboard glows the sort of like the blue, purple, and red of the M division, which I think is quite cool actually. I quite like that. It's quite quirky. And then there's lots of different things you can do it, and then obviously you have in theatre mode where the TV drops down, expressive mode where everything just gets a little bit more ooh. So there's a huge amount you can do with the car and personalise it to how you like it. And it will also activate, for instance, in the sport. It's making a really weird noise now. Why is it doing that? Because it's in that expressive mode. Oh, stop. Don't want sport. I want that personal. when you're in the sport mode and in that mode, it does this thing called iconic sounds, which is the Hans Zimmer orchestral thing. I'll show you that when we drive it. This is still worth talking about along here for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is capacitive, this strip here, so the hazard warning, it's not an actual button. You press the strip and it works really well. I like it. Heated rear screen, maximum defrost, the front screen. You can switch the vents on and off just by touching the strip here, but then you can also adjust their airflow because there's little rubber wheels underneath here where you can just adjust where they come from and things. This also has gesture control, so turning the volume up, you can just do that, you know, swiping between tracks and things, you can just do this. You can see it's moving as I'm doing that. So I have to be careful because I'm very demonstrative. But that will change, you know, obviously depending on what you want. Now, obviously, you get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. That goes without saying. You've also got this wireless charging pad in front of the 2 cup holders here for your mobile. Obviously, 2 cup holders, which you can see, I got my big flasks in. That's there. And then you get this switch pack here, which, like the BMW iX and the iX1 that we tested as well, you've got sort of capacitive buttons around here. So for home, media, telephone and navigation, and then obviously for adjusting the ride height of the car, your parking cameras, your My Modes, and also volume control as well. So you can control the volume from here, you can control it through gesture, and you control it from the steering wheel as well. So there's certainly enough physical buttons that you're not going to be too short-changed. The climate menu you saw earlier is in the screen, but a little bit like the kind of Mustang Mach-E, the temperature bit is always on, and it's got that nice little click with the feedback. You click the climate menu. It is a little bit confusing, so again, you've got to kind of go in here to actually adjust seat heating, temperature, and where obviously the airflow is going as well, so you can do all that from in there, which is absolutely fine. You know, obviously you've got the heated steering wheel as well, which you can have, heated seats as you'd expect. So all that is, well, as I say, as you'd expect. But as I say, that I feel that there's not enough standard on the car for the price that the car is. The other, excuse me, another thing going on from that is, like, unlike the iX, you don't get the heated arm pads and armrests. You know, that's something again for this level of car, I thought, you know, they would, given that the iX is their flagship SUV and the i7 is their flagship car, I would have thought I would have had that. Storage, yeah, you get storage in there. There's 2 USB-C ports in there as well. Your driving position is excellent. These seats are superb. And as I say, these are the kind of standard seats. They're not the M Sport seats. So they've got enough support in them. And as I say, the bolsters will also move depending obviously on what you're doing. So if you go into sport mode, you can feel the bolsters clamp around you, which is nice. Steering wheel, well, again, because it's the Excellence model, I prefer the steering wheel. On an M Sport, you get a slightly thicker rim and it's 3 spokes. This is the 2-spoke design you get with the Excellence. And it is, to paraphrase, excellent. It's really nice to hold. It's got a nice girth round it, whereas the M Sport just feels a little bit thick. Slightly flat at the bottom, but nice and simple in terms of its controls. So the cruise control is over this side, and then you've got adjustment for volume, your Bluetooth, and then your music over here. You can configure the dashboard as you expect. So depending obviously on what you want here, you can change your layout. So you can have it, you can change the dials. So you can have a map readout, or you can change it so it doesn't have as much information. It's got a bigger map, or you can have it so your media is playing on there. There's also a head-up display, which you won't be able to see, but it's in there, comes up on the screen. Again, you can configure what the head-up display shows you. And the navigation as well has this augmented reality, which I really like. So if you're coming up to a junction, you'll get this, it will use the front camera view and it will show you on here what junction it wants you to take off. So that is really slick and easy to use, so I love that. So the interior of the i7 is a triumph as far as I'm concerned. Not just in the way it's designed, but in the way that it works. You just have to get used to all of this. There's just a lot to learn in there. And once you kind of delve into the different menus and you start knowing what everything is, then it all becomes relatively straightforward. But as I say, remember, there's so many different ways you can use this. There's not just the touch screen. Then, as I say, there's also this controller, this iDrive controller here, and you've also got the voice activation as well. So by saying, hey BMW, navigate me to Lockerbie.
I have found multiple results for Lockerbie. Which one should I select?
So there you go, and you just, pick the one which you want. So
Let's go.
All right. So there's a lot you can do, and as I say, you can control the car in many different ways, which is really good. So I do like that. So as I say, you don't have the big drama, the hyper screen that the EQS offers you, but in my opinion, I actually prefer this interior. I think this works really well. My only caveat is there's not enough as standard on it. There's too many options that you need to put on a car at this level that I think should be standard. And my usual bugbear, like the kind of piano black finish around here, gets all fingerprinty and dusty. Other than that, great interior BMW. I love this. So, as I mentioned at the start, it's a 101.7 kilowatt hour usable battery, which is huge. And it should give, according to WLTP figures, a range of up to 385 miles. Now, if you're using the more real-world scenario of the EV database, they're suggesting around about 260 miles in kind of cold weather, up to maybe around about just over the 300 in milder weather. And in fairness, that's what I've been experiencing with the car on this trip. So although I didn't leave to come up to Scotland with it on a full charge the other day, I certainly would have expected very much sort of like 260 to 300 miles would have been where I would have got from the car. Now, I've only driven a short distance this morning, so it's not giving me a particularly accurate readout on its average, but since from a couple of weeks ago, it's been averaging out around about 2.8 miles per kilowatt hour, so not brilliant. You kind of want more than that, but I'm going to take that with a pinch of salt because, as I say, my journey up here is just all motorway, which, as you know, kills a battery and doesn't do anything for your efficiency because you're on power all the time. So motorway speeds 75 mile an hour all the way up. Oh, sorry, officer, 70 miles an hour all the way up with aircon on and music on. So 260 to 300 miles should be achievable by all accounts. Now, charging speeds, 190 kilowatts. So there's better out there, there's worse out there in fairness. And it does mean you can go from your 10 to 80% charge with a charge of 150, 170 kilowatts, around about 30, 35 minutes. And I have to say, that's exactly what I've been getting from the car, from the high-speed chargers that I've been using on the way up here. The car also has an onboard 11 kilowatt charger, so if you've got that three-phase electricity and a more powerful wall box, then you're probably going to be looking at maybe 10 to 11 hours for a full charge from home, but you're more likely 7 kilowatt wall box because the battery is such a size, you're probably going to be looking around about 15 to 16 hours for a full charge from that. So just bear that in mind. Now, the i7 drives beautifully. There's no getting away from that. Between this and the EQS, this is the better car. Now, the EQS is brilliant. There's no getting away from that. It is brilliant. But like Mercedes have been renowned for, as I said, they are a car more that you're driven in. And the EQS does a lot to sort of like suppress external noises from you. It takes away some of the stress. It takes away some of the noises and the ripples and things on the road that you don't want to feel because it's a luxury car. BMW's always been a bit more about engagement, and it's a very engaging car to drive. Don't get me wrong, it's a very comfortable car. I just think it treads a balance with luxury and refinement and also driver enjoyment that the Mercedes doesn't quite get the right balance with. It's more towards the luxury side, whereas the BMW just balances that off with a driving ability that BMW has always been renowned for. It's 2.7 tons, so it can't really disguise its weight that well, but it is 544 brake horsepower, and that's delivered through two motors, one in the front axle, one in the back axle. And 0 to 60 is dispatched well under 5 seconds. I think it's 4.7 seconds it dispatches 60 miles an hour in, which is pretty brisk for a car of this size and weight. So fair play to BMW, you've done a cracking job here. The brakes, the steering, everything else, it feels like you're doing it. So whilst a lot of effort is taken away from you, in the sense that as I say, there's an element of it that you don't have to really kind of worry about, and it suppresses some of the noise from you, and there's an element of refinement. It's not devoid of feel, if that makes sense. I hope I'm explaining that well. It's never going to be an M3. Don't think of it like that. It's never going to be an M3, but nor is it kind of really meant to be. It is meant to be a driver's car, but it's still a luxury executive saloon car that has to have, well, as I say, an element of refinement and comfort and quietness about it, and it does do that really, really well. I want to talk about the steering, because the steering is typical BMW. It's very engaging, and another reason why I like these kind of excellence trim on this rather than the M Sport is the wheels that just slightly thinner, I think, and you just get a little bit more feel through it. I like that. I think the M Sport is going to try too hard to be a sports saloon, and I think that's going to go too much the other way. The brakes are good. There's a real mechanical feel to the brakes, even though there isn't really. You can feel the motor. It winds it back first, then the brakes engage, but you don't really feel it through the pedal. The one thing that I really like about the BMW is the adaptive brake regeneration. So you're in drive and you flick the little toggle back to B, and that's the kind of, the brake regen mode. It's a much more aggressive brake regen. Or you can have it in adaptive mode, and that's using the forward cameras, so it knows if there's a car in front of you. So if there's no car there, it will let you coast, but if a car maybe pulls out in front of you, the camera will pick it up, and then all of a sudden the brake regen will get engaged. It will also use GPS location as well. So for instance, if it knows you're coming up to a roundabout, it will again apply harder brake regen, or say a junction, you're coming up to a junction, it knows where you are, so it applies the regen to draw the car up, and then when you move off again, the coast's clear, it takes it all off and allows you to coast. Really clever, works well, and I've had it in adaptive mode all the time. Driving environment, well, as I say, it's like the interior, the thing's just perfect. You've got this perfect driving position, as you'd expect with a BMW. Lovely view of the dashboard, nothing's interrupted in your view, and if it does, you can configure it differently. Everything's within easy reach, or you can use the controller, or you can use your voice command. You get good visibility out the car because it's that kind of squared off, kind of, dare I suggest, slightly kind of more square edge kind of design. You can see a bit more of the extremities of it as well, which is quite handy for placing it into corners. And the suspension is just divine. They've just got this balance that's right, and that's why, as I say, I really think that this excellence trim level is the one to have. It's just the balance of everything that works for me. It's not hard, it's not floaty, it's that kind of Goldilocks thing. It's just right. They've got it pin sharp and perfect for me. I think it works really well. Little humpback bridge. There we go. Now, driving modes, yes, it has them, obviously. I went through them earlier. When you're in the sport mode, you can feel the seats kind of grip you more around at the side. That gets a bit more engagement from you, and you get that Hans Zimmer orchestral noise when you accelerate. And when you accelerate, it's like when we drove the BMW iX1 against the Tesla, and Charlie was sort of saying the way BMW have got the throttle pedal where you can feather it, and it just feels like you're doing it, rather than this all of a sudden bang like Tesla do, where everything feels like it just explodes on you. This just feels a bit more linear, and that, I think, is the key with BMW. When they're moving onto the EV side of things, they're trying to make the transition a bit easier, so they're trying to make the car feel a little bit more like an internal combustion engine car. Don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's my thought. It just feels like it's a car that would be a very easy transition. If you were coming from, a petrol or a diesel 7 Series or a hybrid, and you're going full electric with this one, you're not going to be scared by that throttle response. It's going to feel like what you've been used to with your current BMW, and that's why I think this is the one for me. between this and the EQS. I think they've just made that transition so easy for people. It just works. This is a great car to drive. I mean, I did 6.5 hours in it on the motorway the other day, and now, you know, and I didn't even feel it, and now I'm chucking it round the little back roads of Dumfries and Galloway. It's a real double-edged sword, and I think BMW have done a cracking job with this. I think this is phenomenal. Now, this is going to be anything but a cheap car. In fact, prices for the i7 start at around about £108,000 in excellence trim and go up from there. The particular car I have here is just over £115,000. And I say it's not exactly overburdened with options. It's got the theatre package, the bigger wheels, the metallic paint, and some interior options. But it's not difficult to get your i7 upwards of £150,000 plus. So just go canny. Take it from a Scot when you're ticking those options on the options list. Take it out. And as I say, that's one thing that's kind of slightly disappointed me with the i7 is its standard equipment list. It's going back to BMW of old, where everything's starting to be a bit options, where you think things should be standard. That being said, you do get the first year Ionity charging free with the i7, so that's a bit of a saving because Ionity is quite an expensive charging network. So I say that's a little bit of value to be taken into account when you're talking to the price of the i7. But yeah, as I say, it's not a cheap car. So, not a cheap car. What competition is out there as well? Well, of course, right at the start, as I said, it's the EQS, it's its main competitor from Mercedes-Benz. Audi, I'm sure, going to be along in a second with a new Q8, or certainly a replacement for the A8, not the Q8, for the A8, which I'm sure they'll do an e-tron version of. We're talking a Q8, of course, that kind of builds into that sort of SUV love that we have at the moment, where you're going to maybe see upmarket SUVs as natural rivals to the i7. So the Q8 e-tron, be very easy to get that into six figures. Mercedes-Benz, they're doing an EQS SUV, and of course BMW themselves have the iX, which is at this similar money. So if you want an SUV, you've plenty of choice. And remember, of course, you're also going to have an all-electric version of the new Range Rover, and that's now more a luxury car than an off-roader or an SUV than it's ever been. The big disappointment for me was Jaguar. Jaguar did have an XJ in the works, an all-electric SJ, and again it would have stolen a march on the BMW and the Mercedes ones because it was due out a few years back, but it got canned by the last CEO, and I think that's a real shame because that could have been a really interesting car. You may also see competition coming from the Far East, so Lexus. Now, whilst they're not sort of like pinning their hopes on an all-electric future, it would be foolish to think that maybe a new LS 460 or 500, whatever they want to call it, doesn't come out with maybe some form of electric power. And Genesis, Hyundai's luxury arm, now you can get, whilst we only get the electrified G80, which is more kind of 5 Series and EQE size, they do a G90 in some markets, and I wouldn't bet the house on them not bringing out an electrified version of that to maybe compete with something like this, depending on how well received that G80 is. The real dark horse for me, however, is Maserati, because they're going to do electric versions of their cars now, and they're calling it the Folgore, so that's their kind of electric brand, if you like. So they've already shown the Grecale, their mid-sized SUV in Folgore, and also as well the Gran Turismo, their sports GT in the all-electric Folgore guys. And if they bring out a Quattroporte, a new Quattroporte, you can guarantee there'll be an all-electric version of that. And we know how good-looking Maserati Quattroportes tend to be, so that could be a rival too. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the new BMW i7. We like, well, its comfort and refinement, its interior space, and also the interior ambience, quality and the luxury on offer. It has good range and its on-road dynamics. We don't like, well, let's be honest, the styling is still controversial. It skimps a little on some standard equipment, making it an expensive car by the time you've added what we feel should be standard. It also takes a time to learn where some of the basic controls are in the operating system. And that shared platform with an internal combustion engine car still carries some compromises. So, the new BMW i7. Does it trump the EQS as our favourite money no object luxury EV? Well, as I say, bear in mind there are still some compromises to be made with this car, because BMW have gone down a different route, as I said right at the start, whereas Mercedes-Benz are giving you the option of an internal combustion engine platform with the S-Class, or you can go fully electric with the EQS, whereas BMW are asking you to sort of like make those compromises, so they're only going to offer one car, which is this, the new 7 Series. You either have an all-electric form with the i7, or you can have the same car with internal combustion engines at some point. So as I say, there is a compromise to be made. And the other thing that I also said was, originally BMW and Mercedes used to be two very different cars, because obviously, as I say, the Mercedes was for people who like to be driven in the car, and BMW maybe offered a bit more dynamics for those drivers. But those lines got blurred with the Mercedes AMG products, and obviously we know that there's an AMG EQE out there for those drivers who want that electric power but still want to drive their luxury limousine. So when we take all of that into consideration, do we think the i7 is bettered by the EQS? No, I think this is the better car, and the reason for it is this, because whilst there is still some compromises to be made with it, I think the blend of those dynamics for the driver, allied to the comfort that you get in this car, as in, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're a driver or a passenger, it's a supremely comfortable car. It offers a similar range. Yes, there are the compromises to be made, and okay, charging speeds could maybe be a bit better, but it actually doesn't really detract from doing a long journey like I've done with the new i7. This is a phenomenally good car. I am absolutely blown away by this car. And yes, okay, the styling is a little bit controversial, but as I say, remember, you can't see that front end when you're sat in there, and for me, that makes all the difference. So yes, as far as I am concerned, this new BMW is an absolute triumph, and it's one of the best EVs I have driven. It's that good. Thank you once again for watching another episode of AutoEV. As always, please remember to make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And once you've done that, press the little bell button that's down below, because then that way you'll be notified of when our next road test review goes live, just like the one that we've just done. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And as I say, please remember to leave us your comments down below. Am I absolutely losing my mind at the moment? Are you going to tell me that this is just a hideous thing, and why could I ever possibly say that it's worth spending over 6 figures on something that looks like this? By all means, let me know your comments down below, as I'm sure you will. Remember, we're across all social media as well, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, we're all on those platforms as well, so make sure you're giving us a follow there, because every little bit helps. Thank you for putting up with the kind of slightly windy conditions today. I'm sorry if there's been any interference on the microphone. I'll apologise now. I know we're not great sometimes when it comes to stuff like that, so sorry about that. Oh, if this has just whetted your appetite for even more, and you just can't get enough of our electric car reviews, then stick on the YouTube channel, because there are just literally now hundreds of videos on there, not just road test reviews, but twin tests, used car reviews, van reviews, and even motorbike reviews. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for watching and supporting AutoEV, and I will see you again soon. Probably back down in England though. Thanks again.